Thank you, Haeley, so much for being here with us today. We're very grateful for you to share your experiences and your story and your journey with us.
Which college or university did you attend for your undergraduate degree?
UNC Wilmington.
While you were there, what did you major and minor in?
Yeah, so I majored in psychology and I had a minor in women and gender studies. I graduated in 2016.
What drew you to women's studies?
Yeah, I did not know that I wanted to do a minor. I actually didn't realize there was a minor in women and gender studies until I cannot remember. And even when y'all reached out initially, I was trying to think back to the journey itself, and I still cannot remember the first class I took. I do remember it was with Amy Schlag, who I'm still close with now. And I don't know if it was queer and trans history or if it was something along the lines of historical moments, movements, pivotal action items. But when I first initially took that course, about halfway through, she had just mentioned, this is also a minor. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I want to do more of this work. I want to do more of these things. So then I started down the journey of women and gender studies minors, which actually propelled me into a career in social work. So it actually changed from psychology to social work, because in that minor I took I took a social work course, realized how much I loved the realm of social work. While psychology and social work are very similar, they're also very different in ways. So I recognized my love for social work, and that's kind of how I landed here.
I know you just talked about a little bit of how this minor helped you change exactly what you thought your major was going to be and where you were going to go in that regards. But how has this minor influenced your later career choices?
Yeah, so I actually currently work at an LGBTQ youth resource center in Charlotte, and I did not recognize my passion, nor my own identities or any of that, until doing the women and gender studies minor. And I think it really allowed me to branch out and grow in that area. And I think there's a lot of ways in which other courses kind of touch on women and gender studies and other inequities and the intersectionality of all of those things. But having that women and gender studies minor really allowed me to dive in deeper to all of the identities, and to see what was out there as it relates to the inequities or the injustices that we're seeing in society, and really did allow me to say, oh, actually, what about this thing? Or I actually really have a passion for LGBTQ young people. And that wasn't only because of my own identity, it was because I recognized those inequities like we were talking about. So I think that is, I think, the biggest perk of that I've been seeing through the women and gender studies minor, is being able just to have those baseline, that foundation of understanding of those inequities when moving into, even if you don't want to do another degree or a master's degree, having that women and gender studies minor allowed me to dive in deeper and to make sure that I was fully understanding populations that I would inevitably be serving, and not me. That could also be a collective we serving too. No matter what space you're in, having that degree allows you to connect and reflect on your own identities and better affirm people. Even if you're in a business degree, you're still going to be working with queer and trans people and with women. So like, let's talk about that. So I think with any degree, you're going to be able to boost your skills and be able to connect with people a little bit better when you're able to have those coursework and those really important discussions with other people about people with historically marginalized identities.
Where are you currently employed, and what is your current job title?
Yeah, so I'm currently the Student Advocacy Coordinator at Time Out Youth Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. a lot of things. My biggest roles are actually education based and then school based services. So working directly with students, either who are having difficult times in the school system, either they're being misnamed or misgendered in the school system, not allowed to use the bathroom or other facilities of their choices, or whatever that may be for that individual. But it really is like a very broad definition of case management and crisis intervention type situations in the school system. So right now I'm in 7 counties and 14 districts. So I always say Mecklenburg County and most of the counties that Mecklenburg County touches, with the exception of Lincoln County and Lancaster County in South Carolina. But definitely working with young people on figuring out what that looks like, what case management looks like in the school system. dependent upon their own identities, and then also working with educators to train them on how to better serve LGBTQ young people in the school system and to make sure that schools are more inclusive of students. I love my job. It's a dream job.
So, what path, you've spoken a bit about your path up to this role, but how did your previous careers shape your decision to enter this particular role that you occupy now?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I actually had a position. It was an internship and then kind of transitioned into a slight position. There were two parts of that. Was with a school system in New Hanover County. I worked with the school social workers and school counselors there for a good chunk of time. And then I also had an internship, which also led into a part-time position at Girls on the Run. And so with both of those positions, I recognized my love for working with young people. Number one, it sounds so cliche, but I say it all the time, like young people are our future. And that's so true. It's like we have to support our youth if we want to support futures. So I recognize my love for young people, but also my love for kind of almost like pushing the boundaries a little bit. And I recognize that I can't really do that in the school system as much as I would want to. I think school social work is so important, but I was not able to push those boundaries as much as I wanted to. There were a lot of policies and procedures in play. And so with all of those, it definitely shaped me to kind of leading into Time Out Youth Center. I did not know Time Out Youth Center existed before moving to Charlotte. I actually got my master's in social work, graduated in 2018 from UNC Charlotte. And this was my second internship. So I was an MSW intern until May of 2017. And it just so happened that someone was rolling off of our staff, which meant other people were rolling up and on, which led me into a part-time position at Time Out Youth Center as I think it was programs assistant at that time. I've had a lot of titles. That was programs assistant. And then the following year, I actually had a full-time position. The first title was youth outreach case manager. That was the first one. And so it's basically the same work that I'm doing now, just in different capacities and in different parts of the team. So lots of iterations of a title, same exact type of work. I've been with the agency for almost 4 years now.
What would you say that you're most proud of accomplishing in your career?
I would say the current role that I'm in. When I was at UNCW, and it was actually one of the women and gender studies classes that made me do an hour-long presentation, and I genuinely can't remember, but I do know the first name of the professor was Jennifer, and I can't even remember her last name now. All that to say, though, we had to do an hour-long presentation. I have never been so nervous about something in my life. I've always been bad about public speaking. That course, we did it with, I think, 3 other people. The presentation was at the very end. I did the presentation and I was like, wow, I did an hour-long presentation with like 3 other people. I can take on the world. This is great. I was so prepared and I did all these things. And I think the proudest part of my career is the position that I'm in because I am doing the thing that I was most nervous about. Leading these trainings and leading LGBTQ 101s, trans 101s, safe zone trainings with educators. I regularly have, now virtual meetings with hundreds of people. There's actually a meeting that I led a couple of months ago with an international program, and there were 600 attendees in a Zoom call. And knowing that, like, I'm reaching so many people and that feels really awesome. I'm also not a very boastful, I guess that's the word, boastful person. So that piece of like, I did this thing, I don't really like saying. However, being able to have these conversations in front of, even if it is virtually, in front of 600 people has definitely been the proudest point of my career. And knowing the work that I am doing and the work that Time Out Youth Center is doing is, and I already said it's my dream job and I love what we do, how we do it. Mission, vision, values, all of that is completely aligned. But definitely this part in my career is my most proud because of the agency that I work with and because of the movement that we are kind of pushing forward and because of the young people we're working with. They're so amazing and I learned so much from them every single day. And so I would definitely say that is my proudest point. The first time that I was standing up, pre-COVID, of course, standing in front of an audience getting ready to do an in-person training where I was not nervous at all. I was just like, okay, well, I'm ready. That point, I was like, okay, I got this. Like, this feels good. My career is good. So I'd say that point is my proudest.
What do you think 22-year-old you would say about your current position?
I had no idea what to expect out of a master's degree
Mm.
in general, but especially with social work. I was going into a master's degree in social work with no social work background. I had psychology and a couple of courses with social work. So I think if I, looking back at Haeley at 22, she would be shocked, I would say, but not shocked at all. Like, understanding, like, oh wow, you get to do that work. That's really cool, but that work exists and you managed to like weasel your way in. How'd you do that? So I think that's kind of where I would be sitting with 22-year-old Haeley. I definitely, when I started my master's, I thought I wanted to do clinical based work, and go the route of LCSWA, LCSW work, definitely all the licensures I wanted. And then I realized, like, I cry a lot. It's probably not a good idea for me to be a therapist. So I reflected a lot on that. And so we're not doing that. We're gonna allow the therapist to do the therapist job. So outreach, school-based services, trainings, that is my shtick, and I will definitely stick to it. All that to say, though, I definitely think 22-year-old Haeley would just like, of course she did. Of course that's where she is, but also like,
So, how do you think that having a minor in WGS has benefited you both in the workforce and in your personal life?
it has benefited me in a lot of ways. I know we talked a little bit about it earlier, in that it really does allow you to connect with other people and to dive deeper into certain injustices and different things like that. But just being able to even start my social work journey before social work began. I did have my bachelor's, like I said, was in psychology, but a lot of psychology is very either research, and there was statistics and lots of other spaces. And of course we had like group work courses and things like that. But it was very fundamental. But I think being able to have that women and gender studies minor did allow me to start my master's program that much like more in tune to other people who may have had their bachelor's in social work degree, or other different like humanities degrees, because those are the types of coursework that we did talk about in our master's degree, is talking about those injustices. And we had it wasn't called intersectionality, but it was basically talking about intersectionality and all of the layers that come along with that. And I do believe that the women and gender studies minor allowed me just to be able to have those conversations and to start that work much earlier than other people may have been able to start that work. I genuinely am, and not only because y'all are on the call, genuinely am grateful for that minor. I'm grateful that it kind of just worked out, that I just took a course and realized and jumped on that board. I am grateful for it.
Is there any advice that you would give undergraduate students who are either currently minoring in WGS or are considering minoring in WGS at UNC Wilmington?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're if you're considering it, do it. The work is very important, especially because, and I'm sure there's still an internship opportunity at the very end as well. I learned so much from all of that. So if you're considering it, doing it. If you're considering it, do it. And if you're doing it, great work. Continue the work. But there are just lots of really cool opportunities that you can get with the women and gender studies minor, and the connections that you make. Like I said, I'm still connected with some of the teachers that I had and other students that were in my cohort. So the connections that you get, the opportunities that you see, and the just broad general sense of understanding that you have for other people is so necessary. I mean, especially when we think about the world in which we live in now, in this hybrid world, and figuring out things with COVID and all of the injustice that comes along with COVID. It's just, it will set you up to be able to critically think about other people. And that is so necessary in today's world. So I'd say do it.
We've interviewed, I think, maybe one other person, I think it is McKenna from UNCW, but otherwise it's people who've gotten their minor or major elsewhere in the state. So it's so nice to hear from someone who comes from our program and is doing this fantastic local work. Yeah, it's just really nice to hear, really meaningful.